Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another live recorded episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. This week, we are talking about special flight operations. We're going beyond CARS 901, or the regular drone operations, into CARS 903 and how you get permission to essentially break the law. We've talked about this a bunch in the past. We're kind of digging in because now in 2024, there's been some new developments in the Special Flight Operations Certificate, new risk assessments, and first we're going to lay the foundation and the framework in our new format so that you can kind of build from that and get into the more beyond advanced operations. My name's Ian. With me, I've got Finn. This is Coastal Drone, and we are Canada's drone experts, and we talk every week about drone laws, regulations, and how to make money and fun. In drones.
By the end of today's live stream, you'll know when do you need a Special Flight Operations Certificate, how to apply for a Special Flight Operations Certificate. We're also going to discuss some common questions that people have around special flight operations, and then we'll open it up to questions from the chat at the end. The first question is, when do you need a Special Flight Operations Certificate? If you're preparing for your flight review, this might be a question on your flight review. Broadly speaking, there are two to three categories of special flight operations certificates. The first one we're going to talk about are low-risk operations. These are operations within Department of National Defense airspace. This is if you're flying 5+ drones in Class G away from airports, advertised events, or an RPAS special aviation event, so something like an air show. These would be considered low-risk operations. Then there's also high-risk operations. These are operations with 25 kilogram plus drones, beyond visual line of sight, above 400 feet AGL, 5 or more RPA in controlled airspace or near an airport, or if you're carrying dangerous goods. So a couple weeks ago when we talked about spray drones, we mentioned that spray drones are normally above 25 kilograms and also carry dangerous goods. So that's why a spraying drone operation would be considered a high-risk special flight operation certificate. Now, there's kind of one more broad-ish category of SFOC, and that is for a foreign pilot. So if you are a foreign pilot, you do not hold Canadian citizenship or permanent residency, or you're working for a company that's not registered in Canada, you require a special flight operation certificate for a foreign pilot.
Like it's a 1-year term temporary pilot license or pilot certificate.
If you're coming into Canada to do a foreign pilot high-risk SFOC, you can combine these things together. It's not like you apply for a foreign pilot SFOC and then above 25 kilos or at an advertised event or something. If, like, say a pilot gets hired to fly at an advertised event, like it was like some televised event or something, that would just be one SFOC application.
And the other thing now they do track on the SFOCs is whether or not it's for leisure or pleasure or for work, because they're tracking the economic activity that's coming into the country.
How do you apply for an SFOC? They've recently clarified, and you can actually look on the website, they've split it into 3 categories: foreign operators, basic, and advanced. And one of the nice things is recently the foreign operators, there are some new exemptions for foreign operators if you're strictly doing it for like a recreational or pleasure purpose, or like maybe a small commercial purpose. The regulation that governs SFOCs is 903.02, and there's a bunch of different things that you need to be able to provide when you're applying for an SFOC. They have said that foreign pilots are exempt from a big chunk. It's F to O, so like actually a fairly significant chunk of the application process. So for a foreign operator, all you really need to do, especially if you're just like a basic pilot or just an advanced pilot, you're just kind of flying for fun, is you head to the site there and you can download the form, you fill out the form, you email it to the form, you can read the advisory circular, and then you just shoot them an email. It takes about 30 business days to get the foreign pilot SFOC. There used to be a proof of foreign certification. They've scrapped that. It wasn't really something that they were strictly enforcing anyways, because so many parts of the world don't have a drone permitting process. So it was kind of moot anyways. Or if someone was not a PR but had been living in Canada for a number of years, it didn't necessarily make sense for someone to have to travel back to wherever they're from and get it. One question that we get asked is about the flight review, so foreign operations and the flight review. Basically, if you're a foreign operator preparing for your flight review and you have already passed the advanced written exam and you've gotten your basic certificate, you can now apply for your special flight operations certificate as a basic pilot. What's going to happen is you're now eligible to take the flight review once you've got that SFOC. In the past, it was unclear whether or not you had to reapply for the SFOC once you passed the flight review. They have clarified if you are a foreign operator, you have the basic certificate, and you take the flight review, and you pass the flight review, it now just upgrades it to an advanced certificate without having to reapply for this. Reapply for the SFOC.
It basically, that SFOC number is attached to you and the aircraft that are on the list. And your level of operation is based on the pilot certificate that you hold. So,
and the capabilities of your aircraft.
That's right. Yeah, the safety assurance declaration is still applicable even to people operating under foreign pilot SFOC. That's a really good point.
One of the reasons we're talking about this today is in the last couple weeks, I'd say there's been a number of clarifications around the SFOC process that has made the process a lot smoother for a number of different scenarios, including this one.
Yeah, so essentially it's a simplified application process for a foreign pilot. It's probably, I would still anticipate it taking up to 30 days. Even though it's simplified, it might be faster, but there's only so many staff members at transport and the workload is pretty high. I had a mad scramble to assist someone on a advertised event, foreign pilot SFOC in May, and it is 30 working days, the notice and application process. And this was just under, and it was a scramble and a bit stressful. Don't email transport expecting 7 days from now you're going to have an SFOC.
Low risk operations. How do you apply? For a basic or for a low risk operation, you need either a basic or advanced pilot certificate. Bare minimum. Pretty straightforward. You then need to gather the documents that are in the compliance checklist, the low risk operations compliance checklist. There are now two. There used to just be one compliance checklist. Now there are two compliance checklists, one for low risk, one for high risk. And then you just complete the application, email it to TC. High risk operations, you need an advanced pilot certificate. Before, it was not laid out explicitly that you needed an advanced certificate for certain types of operations. They are now saying that if it is classified as a high risk operation, so 25 kilograms beyond visual line of sight, above 400 feet AGL, you need an advanced pilot certificate. We used to get this question quite frequently, people who are looking up to set up drone spraying operations, particularly because often those are in Class G airspace away from people and airports. They said, well, I'm just flying, no one lives around me. Do I really need an advanced certificate? Could I get away with just the basic? And we were saying, well, officially, there's nothing official that says that you need an advanced pilot certificate, but at the time, they are now saying you need an advanced pilot certificate to apply for a high-risk SFOC.
Bernie in the chat here just pointed out, and I should remind everyone, it's the 30 working days I was referring to is the minimum service standard. It is not guaranteed that you'll get it in 30 days.
No.
It could take much more. I've worked on some that have been infinite time, and they're still we basically shelved it because it was too complex to actually achieve them.
Then for the advanced, you compile the documents required in the compliance checklist, and you also have to complete a specific operational risk assessment, or a SORA. So when Maya was on and we were talking about drone spraying, we mentioned SORA a number of times. This is that documentation. And then you complete the application, email it to Transport Canada. So what is on the compliance checklist for low-risk operations? The purpose of the operation, your qualification, so your pilot certificate.
Back to the purpose one, you might also hear it called a CONOPS, or concept of operations. So if you hear that term, CONOPS means what are you trying to do?
The procedures and maintenance, so like your basic, your normal checklist, emergency checklist, site survey checklist, and maintenance procedures.
You can carbon copy the owner's manual, essentially, if it's a manufactured drone.
Description of weather minima, same. You can just say what is in the owner's manual. Unless you have a personal limitation that is like stronger than the owner's manual, like the owner's manual says something or has a limitation and you prefer to make it above that, but that's fine.
Yeah, if your operation from risk, like say you're doing power line stringing or something, and it's like, okay, we're amending the procedure because we're doing this or that, then yeah, you would want to describe exactly what you're doing for that SFOC.
So separation and collision avoidance procedures, it could be something like, I'm going to use a visual observer for detect and avoid. This is their name and phone number. And the description of air traffic control service coordination. If it's in Class G airspace, you could say there's not a need. If you're going to be operating in Class E, well, it would be, I'm going to use NavDrone to organize the operation. If the tower wanted you to phone them, you can say, I'm going to phone the tower. I have a cell phone with me.
You basically want to do some ahead of time research on something like this to be like, what limitations might you have in this circumstance? The other thing, it goes back to the advanced operations episode where we talked about don't ask for more than you need. Try and keep especially if this is like your first SFOC, keep it as simple as possible. Keep it as streamlined as possible. If you want to fly to 400 feet, but you don't need to now for the job you're doing, altitude increases risk, right? Because there's a lot of math in the risk assessment that is based on how high the drone is operating over ground and also how heavy it is. There's energy and all this stuff that goes into it. So keep it simple.
Yeah, when Ian's talking about this math, it's not just like if you have an aircraft and it falls straight down. It's also if it fell to the side, how far could it go? Yeah. So obviously if you're at a higher altitude, it's going to fall to the side more. This is for bystander avoidance. Then for high-risk operations, you do a risk assessment, compliance checklist. You need the RPAS equipment capability and the pilot information. We're going to have more information about, or we're going to dive deeper into high-risk operations in a future episode.
And for the high-risk stuff, it builds on the low-risk, right? So you have to do all the low-risk stuff plus the high-risk stuff. It's not just,
Does it cost money to apply for an SFOC, Ian?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It will. The proposed fee structure came out 2 years ago now.
18 months, I think.
Yeah.
But something like that.
So the 2025 rule set will bring about a pay-per-use for SFOC application for certain situations.
Mm-hmm. The last fee schedule that was put out, people were pretty against it. It was quite expensive, even for low-risk or foreign pilot SFOCs.
I don't think too many people are sending in SFOCs just because, so that's not really a thing. But if there's other tasks that are pay-per-use that people are sending in things that are not, then that's where maybe it creates a barrier to entry so that it cleans up the level of service.
For high risk SFOCs, there is if you're someone who hasn't filled out an SFOC before or has more limited aviation experience or more limited experience with the SOAR, there is a high likelihood that hiring a consultant would ease the process and would significantly cut down the amount of time that it takes for the SFOC. Not just the time that you're sitting there writing the SFOC, but the amount of time it's going to take for you to get approval for that operation. So does it cost money not to submit the application, but there may be consulting fees associated with an SFOC if it's time sensitive or extremely complicated or it's something that is new to the person applying.
And it's definitely, we've assisted on quite a few as consultants, and there are other people in the audience that have as well. And it's definitely something that the idea of most SFOCs, when you obtain a consultant, the goal should be to try and get an annual and get it as broad a scope as possible, because like we were talking about earlier, keeping them as simple as possible. As soon as you're hiring an expert to do it, like the goal should be to encapsulate as much of your operation into it as possible, either a standing national or something that and it's not just the paperwork on the SFOC. Usually the supporting documentation, your company operations manual, your standard operating procedures, the robustness of that will determine the scope of which your SFOC is available to go to.
How long does it take to get an SFOC? So the minimum is 30 business days, not calendar days. Yeah. So it's not 1 month in advance. It's like a month and a half in advance. This is the minimum for them to consider your application.
They'll actually kick it out.
Exactly. It says on the site, if they see that your operation is within 30 business days, they will cancel your SFOC immediately. They will most likely not deal with it. If it is a complex SFOC, it may take longer than 30 business days. It might take them 30 business days to even crack open the SFOC and start to take a look at it. And then if there's a document missing or they need something else or they're not satisfied with what you've provided, there might be some back and forth. If it's a complex SFOC, high risk, you will be getting a call from an inspector.
Personal recommendation, whenever I submit SFOCs, I send every single document that I anticipate them needing in a single combined PDF. And part of the application process is you get the compliance checklist when you apply for the SFOC, the initial, or you can actually now you can download it right from the site. Whereas it used to be you do your initial, they would send you back the compliance checklist that was up to date. There's a page index at the beginning of that compliance checklist, and they want you to reference it. Build your entire PDF, and then go in and use a PDF editor after the fact and write the actual PDF page number on the compliance checklist using like Apple Preview or Adobe Pro, or there's tons of other options out there. But do that so then every piece of reference is there, and all they have to do is print it all off, and then they can go and reference each document as needed. You're saving yourself a million back and forth emails most likely, and information requests. So I think it's pretty critical to try and bundle everything in. Of course, once you do that, you're going to have to compress it because most email systems will kick back anything more than like 10 or 15 megabytes.
Google is 25, and if you attach something over 25, it will just upload it to Drive and send the person a Drive link.
Yeah, and I don't know how well that works with Transport's email system.
Unknown.
Yeah, so keep it small, but yeah, so no, you don't need to send full color photos aside from maybe your risk assessment maps or something. If you are near but not at an advertised event, would you still need an SFOC?
The limit to be considered as near the advertised event is 30 meters. If you live in like a city, like I do, and there are often events like parades or street festivals or something like that, and you want to fly in your backyard, or if you're me, off my balcony, and you're near the street festival, and you could potentially capture an image of the street festival from your balcony. If you're more than 30 meters away from the advertised event, you're not considered part of the advertised event. SFOC is not required. Even if you were like hired by that event to take photos, you could stand 30 meters away. And I don't think there's an official CARS regulation that states that, but it's kind of the consensus that we've got.
It's got to be in an advisory circular. It's been spoken enough, and I've seen it at enough presentations that it has to be a reg in writing somewhere, or at least in a staff instruction, right? Which is, staff instructions are like internal guidance material on the regs, which then go to advisory circulars, which are public. Like staff instructions do eventually get public anyway, because it's all public information. And then eventually it goes into either proposal or into the regs, or it goes to the AIM, which is like CARS light.
I think basically since the drone regulations have come out, every time there's been a new version of the AIM, there's been minor changes to SFOC applications.
Aeronautical Information Manual. It's a separate guidance document that is provided twice a year by Transport Canada as a further information / clarification on the Canadian aviation regulations. And like you're saying, it is the most up-to-date document that is printed, but not necessarily law. Right? It's interpretation.
If you're looking to apply for an SFOC, I would recommend at least going to the AIM and just looking through in case there's been a major change. All of the changes have been relatively minor, but there has been at least one change per AIM.
If you're near but not at an SFOC, an advertised event, the current is 30 meters or 100 feet horizontally from the perimeter of the event. Also, you still must be within your safety assurance declarations of your drone. So if you're operating a drone that doesn't have an over people or near people, then you need to be also more than 100 feet or 30 meters away from any bystanders that are coming to and from the event. And also, there's a good chance that there's going to be extra traffic in the area. There's likely going to be other drones in the area, so it is still considered a high-risk exercise. There's always a good chance that airplanes and helicopters will show up at these things too. And then the other thing you need to consider, is there a NOTAM in place over that event? Because there might be a restriction, because let's say it's New Year's fireworks. Some municipalities will spool up a NOTAM for a CYR, a restricted airspace. Some will spool up an advisory. It's not a restriction. That's really muddy waters when it comes to this, because now you're back into like CARS 900-06. Should you fly your drone through fireworks? Absolutely not. But where is the border now? Because there is no defined border at that point. It's about being safe and figuring out what a safe standoff distance is. Case in point, I've flown Mavic 3 at Canada Day fireworks in Class G airspace, away from people, well away from where the organized event was. There was an advisory, not a CYR, so the airspace wasn't closed, but the level of effort to go and confirm all these tick boxes and make sure is not trivial, right? You've got to go and double check every single thing and go through your site survey process and consider all the layers of regulation that goes into this. If you go to an event and use your drone at an event, no matter how legitimate or legal it is, you need to consider, have you crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's when it comes to something like this? Because advertised events are high visibility events, and there's a lot of scrutiny on stuff like this. So make sure you are doing your site survey. Make sure you are following the regs. Do you need an SFOC for an indoor operation?
No, the CARS do not apply indoors.
Yeah, so there's no regulation for anything that's inside a structure that has 3 or more walls and a roof. Can you fly inside a building inside a restricted airspace?
Yes, because you're technically not in
You're
the
still
airspace.
indoors.
You're still indoors.
The Aeronautical Act doesn't apply inside buildings.
That's correct.
Crazy case scenarios that I've heard of doing with SFOC. So one of them, the DJI Flycart 30, and is a external delivery drone by DJI. There's Drone Delivery Canada has their own, the Canary or the Sparrow, and a couple others. There's all of these drones are typically over 25 kilograms, which is one of the main high risk SFOC requirements at the moment. Is anything that's operated over 25 kilograms.
Also, if you're doing any delivery, you're beyond visual line of sight.
Yeah,
Mostly.
yeah. I was gonna say delivery isn't SFOC in the act of it. Like if I could see you and hand you a hot dog with a drone, that's fine.
900.06. Your drone's manual says no external loads. So
Safety assurance declarations as soon as you run an external load. If the drone is designed to run an external load, then it's not an external load in the sense of a declaration. So Matrice 600, for example, had a threaded eye on the bottom that you could run an external payload from it. You could run that, but then I wouldn't run it in an advanced environment. We tested that years ago. We had a Matrice 600 running a banner tow idea. Didn't go well. Decided it wasn't worth it because we would have to pursue not only making sure it's flight stable, but also the safety assurance declaration to get it back into controlled airspace would have been a problem. And you definitely wouldn't want to run it near people because it was just chaos in the air. The Flycart 30 has a parachute. It has a long line built in with a winch, and it has redundant batteries and all this, and it's designed to carry up to over 100 kilograms, I think it is, like total system weight. You need an SFOC. It has the sail. So sail 4 is a high safety integration level. Basically, the higher the number is, the higher the risk, the higher the intensity of the operation. So it's a sail 4 certified or attestation on the drone because it has that built-in parachute, because it has the obstacle avoidance radar and the GPS and everything built into it. Last week or the week before, DJI shot a video up at Everest using the Flycart 30 to do garbage collection on the mountain. The fact is they were able to get about 9 minutes of airtime on it at 18,000 feet, basically they're flying this thing up to. Like base camp was at 12 and a half. So that's significant because the density altitude is a thing. And this was during their Himalayan summer, right? So it's warm. That's something that I see really changing the game, even here in Canada. The drone cleaning business is huge, right? There's a ton of companies out there now that are definitely working on that. Some companies are working under SFOC. Some companies are doing it a little differently. It's interesting. I'd love to get someone on and talk about that. If you're thinking about ideas and why this is relevant to you, right? The SFOC, getting beyond 901, this is where all the innovation is. Before the CARS 901 existed in 2019, every single drone operation that wasn't a for fun flight in the middle of nowhere required an SFOC, which meant tons of paperwork to get that done. So what's happened is in all of these flights that we do now routinely were SFOCs. They built this massive amount of basically collective experience and knowledge about what's considered a routine safe drone operation. And then they amended the laws based on that.
And that's what's happening with the level 1 complex as well.
Exactly. So everything we're doing now in a year to some extent will be routine and will be amended into the regular operations.
Half of the SFOCs we talked about will become not SFOCs anymore. They will become level 1 complex operations. I believe above 25 kilos, above 400 feet, and beyond visual line of sight in some circumstances will become level 1 complex operations. So they
expand the envelope, right? So when the original NPA came out, the Notice of Proposed Amendment in 2020, the scope of the weight increase was initially from 25 to 150 and then to 600 kilograms.
Yeah, so 25 to 150 is going to be classified as a medium drone, and then 150 plus would, I guess, just be a heavy or a large or a heavy drone.
It will currently be an SFOC, but they're basically scoping it so that you could potentially operate up to 600 kilos.
Yeah, because it'll be level 1 complex, and then everything outside of the scope of the level 1 complex will be an SFOC, and then there'll be a level 2 complex.
It's inexpensive when you consider both time and money to get a basic, less inexpensive for an advanced, and then an SFOC is mostly time right now, but then a level 1 complex will be time and money. Most flight schools are going to, like the price of training is going to correspond to the demand and the time involved in getting it. So yeah, level 2 complex is probably going to be a 4-figure investment to get a course. So beyond line of sight is being used quite a bit for right-of-way inspection and mapping and scanning. There's situations where you may not need, if you're doing like an extended long right-of-way, you might have a visual observer with you and fly long distance with the operator in the vehicle and a visual observer in the vehicle and someone else driving the car that's not involved in the operation, so that you can move your entire operation linear if you have a road. But if you don't have a road, like say you're doing a rail inspection or a pipeline inspection in the middle of nowhere, now you're going to need to be on line of sight SFOC. So,
or extend a visual line of sight with a string of visual observers.
Yeah, which then means you'd have to have radios and side-by-sides and spend 10 hours getting everyone laid out.
20 people. And
yeah, so if you can go to be on line of sight, it eliminates that entire setup process. But then you basically have to have like some sort of detect and avoid system. So there's companies in northern Alberta like FlySafe, that Air Market, that have been working hard on drone UTM, unmanned traffic management. And so all of their work has been under SFOC for the past few years, where they've done very long range, beyond line of sight, fixed wing, like corridor testing. And they're using cellular to bring the data back. And they've used chase planes in the past to test it as well. So they have like, this is how our detect and avoid system will work, but we also have to trust and verify it. So,
do flights in Winnipeg require an SFOC?
Because of the direct DND?
Because Winnipeg International Airport, there is also a Canadian Forces base at the airport. Ultimately, the answer that I found the most compelling was the CFS says that it's private or it's public.
When you look at an aerodrome information page in the Canada Flight Supplement or the CFS, in the second row after information is OPR, and that's the operator of the airport. And for Winnipeg, the operator is a private entity.
Is it a private entity? I thought it was public, like
Well, it's not DND.
It's not the DND, yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's probably like Winnipeg Airport Authority, which is
municipality,
which would be the municipality. Yeah, so that's how NavDrone determines, like in the NavDrone software, that's how it determines whether or not something is a DND airport. Is if in the CFS it says it's DND versus not. If someone has heard directly from Transport Canada, I'm happy to hear that response, because the last time I saw this debate on, I think it was in our community as well, when this debate had heard, no one had got an official word from Transport Canada regarding this.
I would say the data source is the CFS.
That's the ultimate source for information about airports.
And the CFS is also the most up to date. It's a 56 days.
56 days, just like the Canada Air Pilot and the low charts and stuff like that.
So it's the highest frequency aviation document that's available to pilots. So the AIM is routine.
AIM is routine, yeah.
And then maps are as needed.
Yeah, technically. So normally in Metro Vancouver, we get the maps once a year. But this year they were like 4 or 5 months early, because they changed the dimensions of the Abbotsford Class E extensions. Oh, okay. So actually now in the Sumas Mountain area, the Class E shelf is a lot lower than it used to be. It used to be at like 8,000 feet, and now it's like 4,500 feet. Oh. So they had to update the maps. But that was really rare, and it caught everybody off guard, because normally they're released in Metro Vancouver for my entire career since 2017. They've been released near the end of the summer in like July, August, September. But this year they were released in March.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any other burning questions, if you're finding this content useful, you know what button to press. It's either the like or subscribe button, or both. But if it is useful to you and you think someone else might benefit from it, please also hit that share button, and let them know about our podcast, which is recorded live every week Wednesdays at 10 o'clock Pacific. If you want to join us live and actually be part of the audience, you can hit us up at community.coastaldrone.co, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks again, everyone, and take care. Which camera are we looking at?
Wide camera.
That one. Bye.